Nancy Cavey. I am a Florida Social Security Disability attorney, and I want to welcome you to the Social Security Disability version of A Winning Isn't Easy. Now, before I get started, I've got to give you a legal disclaimer. I have to tell you that the podcast is not legal advice. The Florida Bar Association says I have to say this, so I've said it. Nothing, however, is going to prevent me from giving you an easy-to-understand overview of the Social Security Disability claims process, the games that are played, and what you need to know to get the Social Security disability benefits you deserve. Now, in last week's episode, I talked about, with a guest, the differences between Social Security disability and SSI. Today, I'm going to be covering what's called the non-medical criteria, and I'm going to give you more of an overview regarding the 5-step sequential evaluation. It's important that you understand this so that you appreciate what goes into proving your entitlement to benefits. So I'm going to talk about the following things. What are non-medical disability criteria, and why is that important in my Social Security disability claim? Number 2, after the Social Security Administration determines my insured status, the second question they're going to ask is whether or not I have a medical condition that qualifies for Social Security disability benefits. And lastly, I'm going to talk about what happens after the Social Security Administration determines that I've met the non-medical criteria. And we'll talk more about that 5-step sequential evaluation. Get out your pen, your pad, or your Chromebook. And in the meantime, we're going to take a break so that you get set up so you can take notes. Got it?
Filing for Social Security disability, or has your claim been denied already? Either way, you require a copy of your rights to Social Security disability benefits, which will cover everything you need to know about the Social Security disability claims process. Request your free copy of the book at caveylaw.com today.
Welcome back to Winning Isn't Easy. What are the non-medical disability criteria in a Social Security disability claim, and why is that important? There are many hurdles to getting Social Security benefits. Now, before the Social Security Administration uses the 5-step sequential evaluation to determine your entitlement to benefits, you have to get past the non-medical disability criteria, or otherwise you don't get to the 5-step sequential evaluation process. Now, non-medical criteria are just that. While many criteria are in fact medical in nature, you also have to establish the non-medical criteria to establish your entitlement or eligibility for benefits. And if you don't get past these non-medical disability criteria, then you never get to the rest of the issues in your case. So one of the most important non-medical disability criteria is your insured status. Why is that so important? Well, the first thing Social Security Administration is going to look at is your insured status to determine whether you have been employed, how long you were employed, and how much you paid in FICA premiums. Remember those deductions from your paycheck? Now, your age will determine how long you must have worked to be insured for Social Security purposes. And you can earn credits of coverage each quarter based on how much you earn. Generally, you have to have 20 quarters out of the last 40 quarters, or in other words, worked and earned sufficient income in 5 out of the last 10 years. The number of quarters required, it depends on your age, as younger workers are required to have fewer quarters of coverage. Now, your birth certificate can be used as proof of your age, or Social Security can obtain that information from their computer database, because obviously they got to figure out when were you born and what quarters of coverage are required based on your date of birth. Now, that really is crucial because, as I've said, there's some consequences if you don't have enough quarters of coverage. So what happens if you don't have enough quarters of coverage? First off, if Social Security says that you don't, I don't want you to assume that SSA's information is right. You may have worked for an employer who didn't report your earnings or the correct amount of your earnings. So if they say, no, you don't have enough quarters of coverage, you want to ask for a copy of the earnings record. You want to look at it closely to see if there's any error. Now, If you don't have enough quarters of coverage, you are just not eligible for Social Security disability benefits. And an alternative would be to apply for supplemental security income benefits if you meet the asset test requirements. Let's talk a moment about correcting your Social Security earnings so that you can apply for Social Security disability benefits. Now, remember, regardless of how disabled you might be, if you don't have enough quarters of coverage, you're just not insured for Social Security disability purposes, and you're not eligible. Before you apply for benefits, you should go online and set up a Social Security account at www.ssa.gov/my account and check your earnings records. You want to see if you've got the applicable quarters of coverage, because you don't want to apply for Social Security benefits and be told that you don't have enough quarters of coverage. That fight will just begin, and your application will go nowhere until that issue is resolved. So what's an earnings record? Well, it's a list of all the years that you worked and paid into the Social Security system and how much you paid in Social Security tax. Again, depending on your age, you must have paid into the Social Security system 20 out of the last 40 quarters before you became disabled. Now, the amount that you have to earn to get a work credit changes every year. So you need to know that number for each year as you check your earnings records if Social Security is saying you are not insured for Social Security purposes because you don't have enough quarters of coverage. So I'm often asked, what are the common mistakes in an earnings record? Now, there are lots of mistakes. But if you find an error or think there's an error, you're going to have to correct those errors through the IRS. Now, normally you can only go back 3 years, but there are exceptions to that rule. And as a matter of course, I think you should be checking your earnings record every year to make sure your employer has reported or correctly reported your earnings to the IRS and that the IRS has correctly recorded that information. I'm sure that's the first time anybody's told you that, but I think that that's something that people should do sort of as their New Year's checklist item. So add that to the things that you do in the New Year's and the goals that you want to achieve. I want to check my earnings record. Now, there are some exceptions to this because normally you can only go back 3 years. And as a matter of course, you want the IRS ultimately to fix these issues. And you're going to have to submit maybe pay stubs and other information to establish the amount of your earnings and ask IRS to fix it. Now, once they have fixed, in quote, the problem, you can proceed with your claim as if you're insured. Social Security is not going to correct your earnings record, even if you give them proof. It's the IRS that has to do the correction. Now, another way to do that is to file an amended tax return. And you potentially can get extra quarters of coverage, but you have to do that in consultation with a tax professional. And I normally see this with clients who are operating small businesses and they're self-employed. And they'll be surprised if you have to prove that the reported income was earned and received. Again, something you do in consultation with your tax preparer and the IRS, nothing that a Social Security disability lawyer is going to get involved in. Now, if you don't have enough quarters of coverage, we have an alternative, and that's the Supplemental Security Income Alternative. That's known as SSI, and it's not an insured-based program, and work credits are not an issue, but it's asset-based. And if you have too much in the way of assets, you're not eligible for benefits regardless of how disabled you might be. I know this is a little complicated and technical, but as a Social Security lawyer, one of the first things I want to know as prospective clients call in is, are you insured? Do you have enough quarters of coverage? And if you don't know, we're going to send you to the local office to call, or we're going to ask you to get on www.ssa.gov to see that. And we're going to want a copy of it because we don't want to file a claim and get a denial on the basis that you were not insured. And if we can't help you because you are not insured, we're going to be talking to you about whether you might qualify for SSI. So this is one of the first questions out of the box, not necessarily, are you disabled? Why did you stop working? Who are your doctors? Got it? Let's take a break.